Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GC. Yeah, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GC. Yeah, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.
Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from my studio / RV dining room located directly inside America. Welcome back, folks of the interwebs. Once again, JJ Vance here, host of Operation GCD, and perhaps more notably, not the vice president. Anyhow, I will be your pilot and navigator here tonight, folks of the interwebs, for this shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. So thank you all for joining me here again tonight. Not going to lie to you, got a real barn burner here on deck for y'all. The Anatomy of Satanic Panic, volume, I believe it's, where we at? Volume 7? I got confused there. 6 Degrees of Michael Aquino. So it's a little game I like to play here, folks of the interwebs, here on Operation GCD. I like to play 6 Degrees, the 6 Degrees game, like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Well, in fact, you know what? I don't need to introduce this game. I'll just let Kevin Bacon introduce that for us here, right? Oh, perhaps not. So, but the idea of why I like to introduce this game is because of the fact that kind of builds the environment these folks operate in. We discuss a lot of the spooky activities around Michael Aquino here, old Muppet Mikey. He's the focal point of a lot of these conversations, but his pal Anton LaVey is obviously neck deep in all this satanic business as well. And not just the satanic business, because much like old Mikey here with his spooky connections, LaVey's got a bunch of spooky connections himself. So on top of that, we see both of these characters have a very interesting background, right? So, and it's the idea of understanding where these folks come from and, who they associate with. And when I say who they associate with, I mean, LaVey knows all the Manson family characters. He's in fact, Susan Atkins was a vampire stripper at LaVey's strip club there in San Francisco. So, on top of that, there's a lot of other, rumors that have gone around over the years about LaVey and Aquino nonetheless, for that matter. But we see, very much so, they were pals at one point in time, despite later separating paths there in 75, LaVey and Aquino, that is. And when we see them separate paths, well, lo and behold, they claim to, no longer be friends. Right, be partners in the devil there with Sammy Davis Jr. there in the middle. But they turns out that's much like a lot of these folks' statements, they need to be taken in context of their actions, and the actions would dictate that it seems perhaps that's not the case. So they would have reports of interacting throughout life. So that's we know what kind of goes on in the forward, but where these folks come from, I mean, Aquino, he's his mother's got an interesting background, and LaVey nonetheless. But in a lot of things on both parties, I think over the years, looking through all the all the conspiracy culture business over the years in my brain hole that I've collected, and a lot of folks kind of write these fellas off as especially LaVey as a pop culture Satanist kind of guy, kind of more of a clown show, if you will. He was a carnival barker. But turns out LaVey's hero in life was an international arms trafficker. And on top of that, the folks that would be the early members of the Church of Satan would be the wealthy European family, aristocratic family, if you will, that financed that dude's international arms trafficking. So that's funny in a weird and demented way. But on that note, let me introduce you folks to the game I like to play here, 6 Degrees. Kevin Bacon asked for a new Patsy, and I like to do a little Make-A-Wish, a little Make-A-Wish style foundation wish for him here on finding that new Patsy.
The 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Okay, how did all this start? In 1994, I'm minding on my own business. I'm making movies. I'm trying to raise my family. And I don't remember exactly how I first heard about it, but it just kind of started to seep into my life. People would come up to me and say things like, my cousin made up a game about you. Or, dude, I'm so hungover, man. I was in a bar last night and we were playing your game. I got shit-faced and I'm a mess. I was absolutely horrified. I was furious. But I stopped and I said to myself, you know, sometimes you have to confront your demons. Sometimes you got to face the beast. So I said, get another Patsy, okay? You know, find somebody else.
Well, you asked for it, Kevin Bacon. 6 Degrees of Michael Aquino. Evening there, Harriet, garbage can folks. Yep. Thanks again, folks, to the interwebs for joining me here tonight to get a little GCD here on these topics. So the diabolical Muppet Mikey, right? So it is these connections, the understanding where these folks, the environment they came from, the environment they operated in, and, you know, the folks they associate with, right? Because, you know, as I'm doing it here in the series, folks of the interwebs, I'm trying to use their own words, you know, the Satanist folks here, like Aquino and LaVey and whatnot, in their own, you know, and judge them by their own actions. So we see a lot of mystery surrounding, especially a character like LaVey. I mean, even more so possibly than his buddy Mike there, Muppet Mikey. But nonetheless, you know, a lot of these rumors, you know, there have been various family trees over the years, even by LaVey trying to shitcode his own heritage for some reason, which is, I find that kind of interesting. But nonetheless, we see an ongoing narrative around these guys where you have to kind of look at the details and in their own words and try to understand what that environment was they were operating in, right? Because we see time after time, like, for example, you know, there's this ongoing myth, some will claim, right, that Anton LaVey was not, I repeat, not in the technical advisor for Rosemary's Baby. You know, that satanic shitstorm of a cinematic shitstorm there from Cocaine Bob Evans. We'll see some more of his friends tonight in this tale. You know, Cocaine Bob always rears his ugly head. But we see here in the obituary from the Hollywood publication of Variety, they seem to have no problem calling Anton LaVey the guy that played the devil in Rosemary's Baby. Now, whether or not he was technical advisor, I think that's the game they may like to play, right? Because we see we've seen in past shows here on Operation GCD Thursdays that Aquino claims that there's no Church of Satan stuff in any films, but then he describes the circumstances surrounding the Rosemary's Baby stuff, cites the producer as claiming, well, the producer wrote a whole book about it and never mentioned LaVey once. You know, LaVey's daughter would later claim that he was never there, but turns out it seems like LaVey had no problem claiming he was there, and he was the technical advisor on other films such as The Devil's Reign in 1974 with William Shatner and John Travolta. In fact, that's where John Travolta would join Scientology, is on that set. That's Travolta's own words. So, and we also see in Aquino's own book, him go on to say that, well, there was no, you know, Anton wasn't involved in any of that stuff, but we did ship the devil costume from down to Louisville, Kentucky, where he was a technical advisor on a different film, Satan film. So these ideas, he's like, oh, there's never any of this stuff in film, but then why are these dudes always serving as technical advisors for stuff and then trying to shitcode it later, right? And the same can be said a lot for the relationships with these characters. You know, basically anything at the early onset of the Church of Satan, as we heard in recent shows, we've heard Aquino cite that, you know, he's like, oh, well, I kind of came across them in '67 with some flyers in San Francisco because his mother's from San Francisco and lived and died there after, you know. So, you know, Aquino would grow up a portion of his life in high school and college in Santa Barbara, but his mother moved back to San Francisco. So he writes about, you know, visiting San Francisco, you know, coming across LaVey and these flyers and stuff for the church, you know, early on. So the Church of Satan. So, and then he later claims he joins in March of '69, but then in a butthurt moment in that interview we've heard in recent weeks with a podcast host in the year or two before Aquino allegedly dies, he states that, you know, he was upset with LaVey over the 10 years they had built together in the Church of Satan. So that was 1975 to April of 1966. So I assume that on that virtue of him admitting such thing, that the folks that LaVey's associated with in that time frame, we see one of which is Sammy Davis Jr., the star of Rosemary's, one of the stars of Rosemary's Baby, right? So again, it's just the idea that these things, it's the same old nonsense with these Satanists. Don't trust your eyes, don't trust your ears, pay no attention to your senses, folks. That's what they tell you. But so there is a close association with these folks, but LaVey's associated with a lot of other folks too. Marilyn Monroe, Jane Mansfield, right? Tuesday Weld. And again, these are by his own admittance in a book in 1972 called Popular Witchcraft, in an interview with LaVey from that author called Straight from the Witch's Mouth. So we see, and we've seen both of these characters claim to play these games with what they want to be called, wizards, Satanists, witches. But, LaVey in 72, happy to call himself Straight from the Witch's Mouth. But in that interview, he describes his relationships with, to a certain degree, with Monroe and Mansfield. But Tuesday Weld, he's got some nice things to say about her. And folks aren't familiar with Tuesday Weld, infamous. I don't know about infamous, but she was a Hollywood actress. She's certainly been in a lot of things, had a lot of impact. All of the Laurel Canyon bands seem to love her, from the Beatles to the Beach Boys to the Stones, all those Processian bands. So that's interesting. And, I have to, thereby, again, by Aquino's own admittance, he's around the scene right here with LaVey, intermingling with all these characters and dedicating. LaVey dedicates his Satanic Bible to Monroe, to Mansfield, and to Tuesday Weld there. And again, there's a lot of mysteries and lore surrounding these topics, especially with those three ladies, right? You can easily Google stuff and say, well, they didn't even know each other. That's a classic tale. We don't even know each other. Like I said, there's been a lot of, mysteries around a lot of these topics. I think intentionally done so. Who the devil are you, untangling the mythology surrounding Anton LaVey? We see a lot of these kind of articles over the years, excavating the truth of Anton LaVey's devilish life. Okay. They got a lot of press. Even back there in 1972, they got a full-blown Time magazine article at a time when Time magazine's subscribership was probably near its peak. But we see a very lengthy article about that, trying to describe some details around the environment these folks are operating and why are they getting so much damn press, why are they getting so much damn press? So then we see, he's got an ongoing thing with Marilyn Monroe, whom he apparently dated back in Los Angeles before he was a San Francisco Police Department criminologist in the 1950s. And it seems that wasn't the end of their relations, because old Marilyn and Joe DiMaggio lived in San Francisco in the 1950s, and apparently she continued to have interactions with LaVey. So when we see him later dedicating his Satanic Bible to her, I don't think this is part of the mythos. This is LaVey posing next to her crypt there. So that's creepy. But, I don't think it's part of the mythos at all. It should be considered more so, what these dudes were into. Same with Mansfield. We get silly Vanity Fair articles today. Did the devil kill Jane Mansfield? Well, I'll tell you this. She was definitely involved in these activities around these cult business. And again, by straight out of the witch's mouth, right? Straight out of the witch's mouth. So we're going to be getting into some of those activities and discussing some of those matters. But when I was saying it's kind of interesting to look at where these folks come from as well. So Aquino's mother, Betty Aquino there, Betty, what is she? She's got a long name here. What are we calling her? Marion Dorothy Elizabeth Aquino, maiden name Ford, not the same Betty Ford. So like I said, she would go back to live in San Francisco in the 1950s. And she's, Aquino's talking about interacting and discovering the Church of Satan. Well, that's because he's visiting his mother up there, right? And she was a very interesting character herself, involved in many things that I would describe as communism. Yeah, communism, I think that's the word. She's very lefty politics, Pacifica Radio, stuff like that. She has a background in, right? But on top of that, she was, as a child, a part of the Terman study, right? So this was that longitudinal study of quote unquote gifted kids, right? Children with a higher IQ. And this study not only included the original, study subjects like Aquino's mother there, it also included their offspring. So that puts a real spooky kind of angle on the matter of all things Aquino, the Church of Satan, the Phoenix program come home with Satanic Murder Inc. and all these damn serial killers because, if we're talking about a longitudinal study of these kind of characters and someone like Aquino thrives in an environment, are they just testing to see what he can do too? And doing these kind of environments, is this more of an exam than it is a spook operation too? I mean, is it both spook operation and kind of a longitudinal study on society? I don't know. These sick Nazi bastards, and they are Nazis, nonetheless, that Aquino and themselves, they all professed to ball wash that of Aleister Crowley, and they love him, but they also talk about incorporating Nazi occult rituals in their ritual magic in the Church of Satan in Aquino's own book, as we covered. And I think that's important to note because when we're talking about human experimentation and all of this stuff, that you got no problem murdering, satanic ritual abuse of kids, and weird studies of things. This is all Nazi shit, so it kind of fits in the same mold, if you ask me, folks. Nonetheless, LaVey's got an interesting background as well. So his second wife, not to be confused with his first wife, who started the Church of Satan with him, Diane Haggerty, I believe is her name. Bring that up here. Who, by the way, many rumors suggest after they divorced, LaVey and his first wife, she shacked up with old laser tag Ted Gunderson. Y'all remember Ted, right?
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
They got Ted twice with that laser beam. Apparently, the satanic stuff didn't help him out. But LaVey's, again, I said LaVey was a criminologist. His first wife was involved in these same matters. In fact, she was a handwriting expert and a private investigator. Oh, that's weird. Ted was a private investigator. So when I've been looking to track down some of those rumors around their interactions. Ted, that is, and LaVey's his ex-wife, his first wife. And there's something to be said there with the professions, but and the towns they lived in, they both lived in Vegas. So, but I am continuing on that effort. That would be interesting if we see that kind of connection with these folks, but it has been long rumored of such. But nonetheless, LaVey's second wife writes a book, and in that book, we learn about his international arms trafficking hero, right? Was his name Basil Zorhoff? It sounds like a made up name. Like, I'm not great with names, and a lot of names do sound like Fraggle Rock to me, but this name sounds specifically Fraggle Rocky. So this dude, international arms trafficker, like I said, he was, as we learned from that same book by Blanche Barton here. I'm pulling it up here. She describes not only his love affair with this dude, how the family, that wealthy aristocratic European folks that financed these international arms trafficking, right? Well, it turns out they were the early members of the Church of Satan, according to LaVey's own wife there. And she also describes how there was a grandson of a U.S. president and a number of other characters, not the least of which Forrest J. Ackerman. And if folks have tuned in here to Operation GC in my previous show on Marvel and DC Comics being Thelemic fan fiction, that story focused around a fellow by the name of Forrest J. Ackerman. He was a sci-fi editor and publisher, sci-fi editor to basically every sci-fi writer you can think of, and including L. Ron Hubbard. So he describes as him and L. Ron were part of the Agape Lodge of the OTO, and then Forrest and a bunch of other sci-fi writers there, old Forey they call him, he would join Scientology. Well, lo and behold, we find LaVey's wife, second wife there, describing how Forey Ackerman, was an early member of the Church of Satan. Well, that's fun. So there's some straight connections to the Agape Lodge, Jack Parsons, and all that business, right? And that is an interesting aspect to understand in these matters when we see the occult throughput of all these organizations. You know, the idea that they don't know each other, right, is preposterous, especially when we see somebody like Forey Ackerman, who's carrying on the legacy from the Agape Lodge Scientology, and he's even there in the Church of Satan mix. Again, this is a man who again is very, very influential in science fiction writers, and he's actually a character in the very first Superman comic, strangely enough. But Basil Zarhoff, that was Anton LaVey's hero, right? He was an occultist and an international weapons trafficker. So many have claimed that he was more deserved so of the term, the title, the wickedest man in the world, as opposed to Crowley. So there we go. We see, LaVey with some ball washing to Crowley. We see, his actual hero may be more Crowley than Crowley. But this was his first wife. Laser Tag Ted may or may not have shacked up with her. And then we see the book, The Secret Life of a Satanist, the authorized, so right there, authorized biography of Anton LaVey. So these are the matters and statements of their own, not mine. But when we're looking again at the overall picture of who these folks associate with, the environments they operate in, right? Again, in their own admittance in Michael Aquino's book on the Church of Satan, there's a lot of talk about the Manson family. And again, there's a lot of talk about Kenneth Anger, who's a very close associate with Anton LaVey. Kenneth Anger, of course, was a devout Crowleyite, Thelemite, and weird filmmaker. Got a lot of those around in these elements of these cultists, the weird filmmaker stuff, right? Lord knows what they're filming. But back in, the heyday of the Summer of Love there in San Francisco, when Aquino is claiming he's first coming across LaVey in the Church of Satan, and we see Kenneth Anger's there, the process is there, the Manson family's there, Kenneth Anger's there, his boyfriend Bobby Beausoleil. Now, Bobby Beausoleil, Manson family member, wasn't there on the Tate Polanski or the La Biancas because he'd already been hemmed up for murder of Gary Hinman. So these are the folks that they associate with. This is the environment that they choose to be in. When JJ talks about the Church of Satan, just know I have no relation to that guy. I thought you were part of them, Lucy Morningstar. That's not you. So, yeah, Anton LaVey, that is not his birth name. His birth name is, in fact, Howard Stanton LaVey, and his paternal uncle was a member of the Chicago mob. And in that same book by LaVey's wife, we see her describing how it was very impactful on a young LaVey. This is before he's working for the San Francisco PD, totally legit. This is he's in Las Vegas helping his uncle open up the Flamingo Hotel and Casino for the mob. So they right there and talking about how he's brushing arms with Meyer Lansky and gang, right? The folks that came up with Murder Inc. Okay, well that makes more sense then. See, there's a direct tie from Murder Inc., the mafia's hitman for hire, to an occult version of that here with Aquino and gang and occult, Satanic Murder Inc., if you will, because that's exactly what we get as we see the environment these folks choose to be in. In that same book by Aquino, they talk about Thomas Eugene Creech, an early member of the Church of Satan there in San Francisco, and a serial killer. The man who would survive his death row executions in Idaho recently, and a man who committed the same campaign of murder and robbery as Edward Wayne Edwards did in Idaho 10 years after Ed. In fact, they both married 17-year-olds and to start their campaign, Bonnie and Clyde style, in Idaho Falls, Idaho, 10 years apart. And they also, only connection there, because they also go back to the same Chillicothe reformatory as old Charles Manson, Ed's buddy from 52 there in that same reformatory. So all of these occultist serial killer fellas, Manson, Creech, right? How is Manson and Creech in the same reformatory? They both know LaVey, right? That's weird. These are the environments that I'm talking about as far as understanding these folks and whatever their programs are, whatever their actual intent is, right? because we also see Richard Ramirez, as cited by Dave McGowan, and his theories, which largely, not going to say largely spawned, but largely inspired this series of mine here, is the theory that all of this satanic murder stuff is the Phoenix program come home, courtesy of Aquino and his, Phoenix program activities we've kind of already dissected here in the series, working for Bill Colby and that, other Bill Colby programs such as Operation Gladio and Air America. Well, we see all of that going around here with these satanic cults, the murder, the terror, domestic terror campaigns, the drugs, right? The drugs. So isn't that strange? Again, and we see the gun stuff with LaVey. His hero is an international arms trafficker in the family that was financing that dude, who was apparently more wicked than Crowley. Guess they really got to wash that guy's balls. The family financing that dude is the early membership of the Church of Satan, and they probably knew Thomas Eugene Creech. He was there, right? He was there. So, but we see McGowan's book, him citing Richard Ramirez getting a one-on-one with Anton LaVey, and LaVey's daughter and his son-in-law Nicholas Schreck. We saw that Nazi on the Geraldo show, right? His words, not mine. Satanist Nazi fellow, Nicholas Schreck, aka I think Barry Dobin. It's a strong choice to go by a more powerful name like that. No one's going to believe you're a good Satanist by the name of Barry. Barry the Satanist. But they had continued relations and interactions with Ramirez after his trial and convictions. Nonetheless, we see McGowan citing there the meeting with LaVey beforehand with Ramirez, and Ramirez's cousin and guardian, as also learned in Program to Kill, was one of those Phoenix program assassins from Bill Colby's military assistance command in Vietnam. So we see again the same pattern of behavior and activities there. So it's by no surprise to me that there is a direct connection from this mob hitman network that was formerly known as Murder Inc. directly through LaVey into his uncle's mob connections, Lansky, the Jewish mob, right? Meyer Lansky and gang, right? That's who started those such matters and ran them for many years. And then we see that same kind of evolution almost of that program into the Satanic Murder Inc. with all these serial killers in the Phoenix program come home. So I think that's interesting to consider those matters and consider the international, gun trafficking and all those kind of other such things. So I mentioned Bill Colby. We got our Bill Colby bought in the house. Deeds of Phoenix program, real or imagined, dwarfed by commie terrorism in Vietnam. Well, I'm not going to say that Bill Colby's a hero because communism is bad. That's what you're asking. But I do appreciate your efforts there, RR. That is the Bill Colby, official Bill Colby bot. Every time I mention his name, he pops up. So anyhow, but these things are, Harry, that's Program to Kill. McGowan's Program to Kill. I got that for you right here if you like to take a peek at this. So yeah, again, we see these, again, it's not just Ramirez. It's not just Creech, right? It's not just Manson, Bousselet. There's a lot of murderers, a lot of occult murderers that know these dudes, right? Hang out with these dudes. These dudes being LaVey and Aquino, that is, right? So this is let's see here. Program to Kill. Well, I mean, it's a good read. I'll put a link in the show notes here. Folks can check it out. And there's a lot of good stuff on all of these matters in this book. So that's something to certainly look at it. Look at it. But I thank you all again for joining me here tonight to get a little GCD. If you can catch this broadcast in the future, come on over to patreon.com/Operation GCD. Those folks here tonight, come on down and jump on over there for the remainder of this show here tonight as we get into some of these matters a little bit more deeper and try to understand again the environment, right? The environment in which these folks have started this Church of Satan, and again, seemingly Satanic Murder Inc., amongst many other matters regarding ritual abuse, and done so in a manner, a very spooky manner, a very national security manner, and all of the wouldn't you believe that the roots of these organizations and their leaders, be it Aquino or be it LaVey, have origins in those same matters, meaning were they born into it? Did LaVey or Aquino just suddenly get up one day and like, I'm going to go do some Satan shit and murder folks? I don't know. I'm just saying it seems like this is machinations of a much larger network and programs, and done so in a manner where, again, LaVey's the nephew of a made man in the Jewish mob, right? Aquino's, we don't really know who his father. In the game of who is your daddy and what does he do, and since we were talking about Bill Colby, I'll go ahead and play this one right now.
You tell me, who is your daddy and what does he do?
Yep, Ted Bundy looks a lot like Bill Colby, just saying, folks. And Bill Colby just happened to be in Burlington, Vermont, and around the proximity of when Bundy's mother got knocked up. We don't know a lot about his dad. We don't know a lot about Aquino's dad. There are some theories out there. Some seem plausible. Nonetheless, we do know his mother's in this longitudinal study of this very spooky Nazi-style behaviors. Nazis, oh, well, these fellows are professed Nazis. So, again, this all seems like, again, the same kind of enterprises of Nazi shit. But nonetheless, it's draped in matters of national security and sold to the public and psychological operations of terror and murder and ritual abuse. And it's not a shock to find, again, the onset of these things, these men's lives and their activities involved in such spooky and heinous actions, right? I mean, to compete Aleister Crowley for the wickedest man in the world with this Zoloff fella, Boris Zarlov fella, whatever this guy's name is, Basil Zarhoff, get a new name. LaVey's hero, that should be said to something. Again, this guy wasn't a occultist. I'm assuming these folks that joined the Church of Satan, who were his financiers, if you will, I believe that's how you pronounce that, financiers. I suspect they were all occultists. So when we see they slapped the Satan sticker on it, the occultism didn't start there. In fact, in that book by Aquino's second wife, again, not his first wife may have in fact hooked up with the old laser tag Ted.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
They got him twice, folks. Watch out. So, but in that second book by Blanche Barton Lady, his second wife there, LaVey's, she describes his pre-Church of Satan occult ritual activity. So again, they slapped a sticker on it at one point in time, but that's part of the psychological terror campaign, the Phoenix Come Home and Operation Gladio. That's my argument. And it's the argument I've made in previous shows here on Operation GCD Thursdays. And on that note, folks of the interwebs, thanks again for joining me here tonight. See y'all on over there at Patreon side for the remainder of this program. And Bundy's mom loved a man in uniform. So see y'all over on the other side of this program. And if you catch it in the future, patreon.com, maybe let's see here. Yep. / Operation GCD. Yep. All right, folks. Thanks again.
Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little G it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret society, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Hey, world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.